This is starting to sort of get repetitive, but I think it's still really important to do. We have a cycle that has become very common in modern American politics. The president makes a completely unrealistic promise. He then fails to deliver on that promise. Then he brags about the results, even though they fall short of his promise. Then we find out he criticized a Democratic operative, a politician, or prior president for the exact same result. This time it's Barack Obama over the GDP and Donald Trump's prediction of 4, 5, or even 6% GDP growth. Let me set it up for you and we'll get right into it. GDP is the gross domestic product. It's one of the main ways that we measure the size of our economy. There's a lot of debate over whether GDP is the right way to evaluate an economy, but putting that aside for now, this is the total value of all the stuff we produce and the services that we provide in a year. That's our GDP. During his campaign and after becoming president, Donald Trump was talking about we're going to have 3% GDP growth, 4% GDP growth, 5, even 6% GDP growth. Here's just one example of Donald Trump doing this. This one's during his presidency. He's been predicting it since he was just candidate Trump.
But to get it going the way I really want, where we have GDP getting up to 4, 5, and even 6%, because I think that's possible. If you look back in your notes, you'll say when I said 4%, people said that would be years. Well, it's turned out that I'm right, because without the hurricanes, this last quarter we would have hit 4%.
So, of course, none of this has happened. And yesterday we learned that in the third quarter of this year, the GDP was just 1.9%. Now, it's actually pretty normal. That's a relatively normal level of GDP growth. It's not particularly good or particularly bad. But the thing is, Donald Trump is now cheering it as if it is a signal of the best economy ever, literally tweeting yesterday, quote, the greatest economy in American history. But back in 2012, when Barack Obama had the exact same 1.9% GDP growth, what did Donald Trump tweet? Because there's a tweet for everything. Donald Trump tweeted, Q1 GDP has just been revised down to 1.9%. The economy is in deep trouble. And of course it wasn't. But if it was, then Trump's economy must likewise be in deep trouble on the basis of those same GDP numbers. So this is one more of Donald Trump's insane predictions and his distortions and his being the pot that calls the kettle black. But this is also economically disastrous, and I'm going to tell you why. Remember, Donald Trump, when he told us about his tax cut plan, was told that's going to blow up the deficit. It doesn't balance. It's going to explode the deficit. And Donald Trump said, no, no, no. This tax cut plan is going to cause such growth. We're going to cause, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6% GDP growth, that the growth will pay for the tax cuts in a way that none of the analysts are coming clean with you about. The proposal for tax cuts was scored, and it was a train wreck, totally underwater, hugely deficit exploding, but his acolytes repeated this claim. They said the estimates are wrong. GDP will be up, 5, 6%. It'll pay for the tax cuts in total. Now, aside from whether that makes sense at all, and I would argue it doesn't, it's what he claimed, and it is not happening. And his followers are falling for it. We were told the GDP will go up so much that the tax cuts will be paid for and everything is going to be so good. Everybody will win. Just winning for everybody. And instead, the opposite has happened. And we are now curating, or maybe there's a better way of saying it, Trumpism is curating one of the lowest information electorates that actually thrives on Trump lies and is energized by the distortions which they can then go and repeat all over the internet and Twitter and the normal enclaves, applying no critical analysis whatsoever, either because they're choosing not to apply any critical analysis or because they lack the intellectual capacity and knowledge of critical thinking and epistemology that might be required to do that analysis of what Donald Trump is telling them. But it is hugely damaging to the economy. It's hugely damaging to the fabric of the country in terms of just basic intellectual rigor and thinking. And it has opened the door for this to become the absolute new normal in future presidencies, in future campaigns, where promises don't matter. Any failed promise by the person on your, quote, team is either because someone is misstating what the promise was, or because of the other party that got in the way, or because of, it doesn't even matter what it is. We'll excuse it in some way, shape, or form. The left does this to some degree. It's not as bad, but I don't want to do it. And if you see me doing it, then I hope you will call me out for applying a different standard to the left than the right. One of my priorities, and I think I'm doing an okay job of it, is when the same criticism could apply to both parties, I apply it to both parties. When there are differences between the parties, I point out what they are. And when the status quo is either implicitly or explicitly reinforced by both parties, because it's more of an establishment versus anti-establishment thing, I hope that I'm pointing that out to you as well. If I'm falling short of that goal, I do want you to let me know.